A crime on the train platform. The police investigate at the virtual crime scene.
This is a whole new world for us as investigators. This has never happened before.
Virtual reality leads to new conclusions and new questions.
A crime on a country road. 2 police officers lose their lives. The judge visits the crime scene. In the courtroom,
We documented the crime scene just as the police found it. The pictures were taken as it was at the time.
a museum robbery. A huge gold coin vanishes. Hopefully, the perpetrator's skeletons will reveal their identities.
Then we came up with the idea, can't you describe a person's gait in a way that's individual to them?
And a terrorist who has been on the wanted list for decades is unmasked, thanks to classic police work and AI.
Facial recognition is a powerful tool. A lot's happened in recent years.
4 cases, 4 methods. High tech. Criminals on one side, investigators on the other. And the never-ending quest to escape capture.
It's a game of cat and mouse. One runs ahead while the other chases after it. And if we really want to create and have a state governed by the rule of law, the judiciary and most importantly the police have to follow suit, and that includes modern technology.
Inspecting the scene of the crime at the Bavarian State Criminal Police Office. Fitted with VR goggles and controllers, Police Inspector Alexander Groß immerses himself in virtual worlds
S-Bahn reaches the station.
to solve a real crime.
You can just move around freely.
Ralf Breker from the State Office of the Criminal Investigation Department for Forensic Media Technology created the holodeck, a room where he can recreate any crime scene. At Munich's Stachus suburban railway station, Police Inspector Groß is about to witness a crime.
And now you can proceed to the crime scene.
I'm now standing right in front of it. Exactly. I was almost afraid I'd bump into the train. Of course, that's pretty fascinating.
It was a chance encounter back in November 2021. A man attacks another man on the train platform. As the train arrives, a push. The train can't stop in time. A video camera records everything.
The specific task was to reconstruct the crime scene. We had this video available, and we had the intrinsic data from the suburban railway, so we knew exactly how fast the train was traveling at any given time. And then we could transfer all this to the 3D model of the train.
The video material leaves a lot of questions open.
What would have happened if the perpetrator had pushed the victim a little sooner or a little later? Could the victim have had a chance to avoid the collision sooner? So these are all small points that we want to examine in the virtual space while we try to get a clear picture from different points of view.
Special cameras measure the movements of Police Inspector Groß and transmit them into the virtual space.
For instance, you can roll into the gap down here. That's where the victim barely managed to save his life. Now you're kneeling.
I see, okay. Oh, that's incredible.
Exactly. Now you're here in the gap.
Okay, and where's the victim? Ah, he's here with me, right. I can already see him.
Exactly.
Oh, that's terrifying. There's never any way to capture something like this on location, these visuals.
In this cavity, the man survives the fall in front of the train. But as the train rushes over him, it severs his leg. The perpetrator at his arrest. He suffers from schizophrenia. He says he'd seen the devil in his victim. Surveillance cameras show the crime from just one perspective. But in the holodeck, Police Inspector Groß can view it all from different angles. A view that could be decisive. Was it attempted murder or manslaughter? And how credible are the witnesses' statements?
Of course, the way we observe in the virtual space takes us a quantum leap forward. Now, if I can put myself in a witness' shoes and observe the crime, what can I see? Could someone else have intervened? All these are questions we can answer with certainty.
The crime scene in the holodeck is a digital copy of the real crime scene, accurate down to the millimeter. Police Inspector Groß also enters the scene as a true-to-life double of himself. A body scanner takes the pictures to make this possible.
Please stand in the middle here. Exactly. And very important, the arms here in a V pose, because that's the only way to get a really good 3D model.
Okay.
I'm going to close the door now. The whole thing only takes 2 to 3 seconds.
After 70 SLR cameras photograph the police inspector, he can completely enter the virtual world. This is referred to as immersion.
We want to create the greatest possible immersion. That's very, very important. We work with eye tracking too, for instance, and face tracking. We want the user to appear as realistically as possible. Someday we may even be able to read a witness's or suspect's emotions in virtual reality based on their facial expressions and body language.
Drawing on a cloud of measuring points, the computer generates Alexander Groß's digital twin. The police inspector becomes an avatar, one that's just as realistic as the crime scene and the crime itself. The police can also use it to confront suspects, victims, or lawyers in the holodeck.
People who were not at the scene of the crime, parties to the court proceedings, can revisit the crime scene. The whole virtual reality thing makes a crime scene so simple and adds so much transparency. Virtual reality leads to new conclusions and new questions. That's just been our experience. Basically, this gives us lots and lots of options thanks to virtual reality. And we're really only just getting started.
The investigators don't just observe. They have a whole toolbox at their disposal. They can measure, reconstruct, and insert images. And they can also inspect the crime scene from the outside.
This is a multi-platform, multi-user software, and I can install it on a cell phone or on a desktop computer. So we can have up to 100 people, 200 people on the scene at the same time, no matter where they are in the real world. The whole thing isn't limited to just the holodeck.
You can always step into the virtual crime scene. It doesn't change. All the evidence is fixed in place. This is an opportunity to solve crimes committed a long time ago. Unsolved murders, cold cases.
We're trying to solve cold cases. The technology we have here, of course, is a resource we can keep and call back up whenever we want. And from an investigator's point of view, that makes it worth its weight in gold.
The crime scene, preserved in a virtual 3D model. Is this how the manhunt of tomorrow will look? The crime scene is where the crime ends, and the investigators' work begins. The perpetrator leaves clues behind. You have to be able to read the crime scene. This man had talents like no other before him. Ernst Gait. In the 1920s, he headed the Berlin Homicide Squad, the world's first homicide squad. His criminalistic flair and methods were groundbreaking. Gait's most important rule: no one must change anything at the crime scene. And everyone knows what they have to do. These rules still hold to this day.
The police patrol assesses the scene of the crime. Could this be a capital offense, a crime scene? And that's what always makes the crime scene of the utmost importance for the police.
It's also fundamentally important to document it in detail, because this is where the clues that can lead to the suspect can be found. The Bavarian State Office of Criminal Investigation has preserved the records of early crime scene documentation.
Here we see a sample picture of a crime scene sketch from a murder in 1945. The lady died. And as you can see, the individual areas have been numbered. And they've also recorded what was found where something was found, like a key on the tiled stove or a shelf with milk bowls. So they also took a detailed look at what was found at the crime scene. But I don't want to rule out the possibility, or I'm even assuming that there were considerably more objects in this room that should have been recorded in some way.
Rudimentary sketches are a thing of the past. For some years now, a crime scene can be captured and saved using 3D scans, just the way the perpetrator left it and the police found it. But only now has it become possible to immerse yourself in the action, including the drama that unfolded on a lonely country road in the hills of Germany's Palatinate region. Raphael Mal visited the scene of the crime, not locally though, but virtually, at the district court in Kaiserslautern. He's Germany's first judge to have brought a crime scene inspection into the courtroom.
I put on the headset and had controllers in my hands on the left and right. We had a large screen in the back so that everyone on hand for the proceedings could watch it. And that's basically where we started. The defendants and the defense lawyers sat on this side, and the two public prosecutors and all the expert witnesses sat on the other side. And then the state criminal police office set up the computers here. And then my headset was paired with the computer.
As if in a computer game. But it wasn't a game. It was a bloody crime that had shocked the country just a few months earlier.
2 police officers were killed last night.
The violent deaths of 2 police officers,
24 and 29-year-old colleagues.
Fatally shot during a traffic stop.
We're all shocked, deeply appalled.
Nothing is known yet about the perpetrators.
We also hear a police helicopter.
a manhunt is underway and has now been extended to Saarland.
In the early hours of January 31st, police trainee Jasmin Bux and Detective Alexander Kloos are patrolling a string of burglaries along District Road 22. It's deserted, but then they notice a Renault. It belongs to Andreas S., a master baker with financial problems and a poacher. He and an accomplice have already killed several animals that night.
Essentially, the 2 defendants were standing by the road and shot another wild boar. Then one of the defendants went to retrieve the game that had been shot. At that moment, the 2 police officers arrived on this lonely road, really in the middle of nowhere, and they stopped the suspect and asked them for some identification, which they handed over. Then they walked behind the car, noticed that the trunk was partially ajar and contained dead game. One of the officers then made a radio call.
At 4:19 a.m., the detective radios that a vehicle with 2 dubious persons has been discovered who have the whole trunk full of wild game. At dawn, the country road has become a crime scene. What happened? Just a few minutes after the radio transmission, help rushes to the scene. But the 2 officers have already been shot dead, and the perpetrators have vanished. Later in court, the lawyers and defendants see on screen what the police found that day, with Judge Mal wearing VR goggles. True to detail, virtual reality, and yet real, and so disturbing that the police will not release the images.
We documented the crime scene as the police found it at the time. The vehicles were involved. They were all the clues of the crime, starting with the ammunition. Of course, the whole scenario also included the bodies of the two officers. A court can also make a site visit, which would have allowed us to see the place live, but the drawback was that all the vegetation was completely different, and all the traces of the crime were naturally gone. It was 6 months later, so it was true to the original but not recreated, but the pictures were taken as it looked on location at the time.
Jacqueline S. from the Rhineland-Palatinate State Criminal Police Office took the pictures at the time. Together with a colleague, she uses a model to show how she photographed and measured the crime scene along the country road near Kusel to preserve it in the virtual space, clue by clue.
This is a terrestrial laser scanner used to capture the crime scene. It measures the space and generates a 3D image. So every point it captures with the rotating mirror and the laser is a point in space, and later the 3D laser scan is generated from this.
The scanner measures millions of points, precisely and in seconds. This is how it creates a spatial 3D model. Then there are the photos taken with a panoramic camera. Everything is captured in this way. There's nothing the camera overlooks. It creates a virtual tour of the crime scene. It preserves seemingly unimportant details as well as objects or traces seized, blood, cartridges, crime scene weapons, evidence.
The data is embedded in the 3D model so that the exact location of the evidence can be traced later on, and detailed images can be added for accuracy. So laboratory images or images from examinations can be added later, for example, to help explain the course of the crime. So if fingerprints are found on the murder weapon, they're photographed and can be included.
A drone also films the crime scene from above. The team from the State Criminal Police Office only arrives the day after the murders, finding a crime scene that has already changed. This makes the initial images all the more crucial for the forensic investigators. Later on, Jacqueline S. adds all of her fellow officers' photos to the virtual scenario, including the pictures of the two victims, who at this stage have already been sent to be autopsied.
It's not dramatic if we're not there when the body is still in place. Our colleagues can secure the evidence photographically, and we then calculate it as a 3D model before inserting it back into the 3D scan.
The virtual crime scene becomes an important tool for reconstructing the course of the crime. The suspects are caught on the same day. The ID that Andreas S. had shown at the checkpoint was found near the bodies. In his car, dead game and bullet holes, apparently clear evidence of the crime. But the men incriminate each other. Which of them pulled the trigger? Is there one killer or two? To form his own opinion and determine a sentence later on, Judge Mal becomes a witness to the events in virtual space.
First, I went through it on my own. But then the public prosecutor's office and the defense lawyers were afforded the right to cross-examine. And they gave me instructions. They said, jump over there and look to the left or to the right. And so they could see everything.
The defendant spoke too.
He also said he'd like to see this and this and this. And that's what I did.
An extraordinary collaboration in the courtroom. The virtual crime scene lets defendants, lawyers, and judges see everything at the same time. Where are the bullet casings? Where are the traces of blood? This is important evidence.
The traces of blood found at the scene were actually decisive for us. So we could actually reconstruct the path of the police officer, how he was shot, and how he then ran further into the field. And we were also able to reconstruct the sequence of shots fired by the accused.
It took Jacqueline S. 2.5 weeks and many hours of overtime to assemble images and analyses to create the virtual model. In the case of serious capital crimes, this is an effort that pays off.
For the bigger deals like the Kusel trial, which are more publicized, where you don't exactly know what happened or the perpetrator is unknown, it gives you a way to understand things much better.
The meticulously preserved traces of the crime bring clarity to the courtroom. Clarity about the role of the accused, Florian V. and Andreas S., in the brutal double murder in Kusel. The virtual crime scene inspection, backed by expert reports and analyses, provides detailed information about how the main suspect acted after Detective Kloos sent his radio message.
At this moment, the main defendant then first shot at the police officer with a shotgun, who then fell to the ground. He fired another shot at the police officer, then ran around the car, then grabbed the hunting weapon. Meanwhile, the other officer also defended herself, fired a few shots, and was hit herself by the defendant for the first time on the street.
Alexander Kloos was able to send a second radio message just 45 seconds after the first one. A call for help. Come quickly, they're shooting. We're between Ulmet and... The shots took the police officers completely by surprise. Their killer was an experienced marksman, and his weapon was fitted with a night vision scope.
The night vision equipment is amazingly good. So in the main trial, it turned out that he had one worth 12,000 euros. You can see everything with it. The male officer then staggered further into the field, where he went down and was hit again. Then the main defendant went in, turned him around, and then shot him again in the head. The defendant went back up, then turned the car around. He looked for his wallet with his ID, but couldn't find it. Then he went back to the female officer who was lying on the ground, realized that she was still alive, and shot her again in the head with a shotgun. No different from an execution.
The court sentenced Andreas S. to life imprisonment and noted the particular gravity of his guilt. Andreas S. had shot and killed the police officers the way he shot animals, just to prevent discovery of his poaching and possession of illegal weapons. Clear traces at the crime scene proved that he was the sole perpetrator of this double murder. The tools for analyzing perpetrators' traces are growing increasingly powerful. 1901, human blood. A little later, the uniqueness of the fingerprint is recognized and admitted as evidence. The next milestone, the genetic fingerprint. A person's DNA profile that can be found in tiny traces of skin, hair, sperm, saliva, and blood, and matches just one person with a probability of 1 to 100 billion. Fiber, pollen, and weapon analysis have also long been part of forensic technology.
Taken all together, I think it's hard not to leave any traces behind. As the perpetrator, you might just have to be lucky that you're not registered in the database.
And people have long been leaving traces here too. On cell phones, computers, on videos from surveillance cameras. Digital traces. On March 27, 2017, 3 men are filmed at the Hackescher Markt suburban railway station in Berlin. Surveillance footage shows them walking up the stairs to the tracks, along the platform, down to the end, until the camera loses them from view. The rail line runs right alongside the Bode Museum, where on the upper floor, the largest gold coin in the world was on display at the time. The big maple leaf, weighing 100 kilos. It's stolen in the early hours of March 27th. A mission for Detective Allange from the Berlin State Criminal Police Office. He's the chief investigator for art crime in the capital. The investigators quickly realize how the thieves must have broken into the museum.
The perpetrators made their way to the museum from here, climbing the stairs at night. The platform was not in use at the time, and there was no train traffic. The perpetrators were recorded by several cameras.
The investigators are convinced that this is footage of the perpetrators. But they don't know who these men are. Their faces are unrecognizable.
We also have a camera here that everyone can see, even the perpetrators. Incidentally, that's why our burglars ducked away from the camera and at times even wore headgear to make identification difficult or impossible.
A few months after the robbery, the police are tipped off. Members of the well-known Remo clan are arrested. They're said to have stolen the gold coin. Are the men who were arrested the men in the video? Professor Labude, a professor of digital forensics at the Mittweida University of Applied Sciences, intends to get to the bottom of this. He often evaluates videos as an expert witness in criminal trials.
50% of the final expert opinion featured the fact that the task was to compare the confiscated clothing with the clothing on the videos and to say, yes, these are of a similar type, from a similar manufacturer or from the same manufacturer. So that was 50% of the expert opinion. And then, together with the team from Berlin, we actually came up with the idea, can't you describe the way people walk, their gait, as an individual trait?
Labude develops a method to measure the perpetrator's skeletons. Each skeleton is unique, he says, as unique as a fingerprint or DNA. At the Criminal Investigation Division in Berlin, he places the Remos on a turntable, attaches measuring points to the joints, and calculates their digital skeletons, also known as rigs. He superimposes the surveillance videos over them for comparison.
So if we block out this person right now, yeah, so this shoulder joint fits, so to speak, exactly where it should have been. And then this rig actually matches this person exactly. So that's the position of the gold coin.
The digital twins match. But the investigators are also following other traces on the tools of the crime, on ladders, door wedges, and on a rope that the perpetrators used to descend from the railroad viaduct. There are traces of DNA on it.
Ultimately, the DNA trace alone will never necessarily tell us that this person was the burglar. You always have to view it in combination with other evidence, witness statements, and other traces. A DNA trace can also have a completely different explanation as to how it got to the crime scene. And we don't want to be accused of that in court. We have to try to clarify that in the course of the investigation and deliver a clear picture.
Thanks to the evidence, the picture becomes clearer and clearer. The forensic experts find gold dust on the clothing of the suspected museum burglars. It can be clearly associated with the stolen coin. The investigators suspect that the gold shavings fell off when the loot was sawed into pieces. The gold coin never resurfaced. Although the Remos never confessed to the crime, they were sentenced nevertheless. 3 to 4.5 years in prison. A judgment based on circumstantial evidence. In light of all the evidence, the court had no doubt that they were the perpetrators. Professor Labude's skeletal analysis was also intended to support the charge, but he could not convince the judge of the new method.
This was the first time we really did that with the gold coin. We came up short there. Failure is part of the business. But it wasn't due to the method itself, but because it was the first time we had trouble handling this situation with the rig in court. And we still weren't in a position to actually describe it in a way that everyone involved could somehow understand.
A few years later, when investigating bank robbers, the professor was asked to weigh in again. Could the man in the light-colored coat be the same person who was arrested? After the gold coin trial, Labude continued to refine and develop his skeletal analysis.
So we were there with this expert opinion in the main hearing, presented the method, presented the results, and in the end, in his free evaluation of the evidence, the judge said, yes, he accepts this and considers this as evidence as a way to demonstrate that the person shown here in the trench coat was in fact the perpetrator.
The methods used to catch suspects are also rapidly evolving. Broad appeals to the public remain the method of choice. But technology can also track people down with just a single photo, based on characteristic features. This is biometric facial recognition, the modern-day wanted poster.
Facial recognition is a powerful tool. A lot's happened in recent years. So now we can identify people, search for them automatically place them on a wanted list, and even monitor areas to identify people by their face.
Biometrics is the research field of Florian Kirschbuchner from the Fraunhofer Institute for Computer Graphics Research. He has also tested systems for identifying people for Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office. AI is increasingly used to assist with facial recognition. Artificial intelligence. It sifts through vast amounts of data in minutes. Faces can no longer hide in the masses.
People often underestimate the internet. Older people especially are less familiar with the technology, the things that are possible with technology, and what we can do with these computer systems nowadays. The leap forward in the evolution of AI also makes a lot of things work, and normal users aren't aware of many of the technical possibilities.
Daniela Klette also had no idea what would be possible. The terrorist was a member of the third generation of the RAF, along with Ernst Volker Staub and Burkhard Garweg. She was one of Germany's most wanted. Around 1989, the trio went underground. They stand accused of attempted murder, robberies, and attacks.
In 1993, members of the Red Army faction blew up the prison in Weiterstadt.
The perpetrators used armed force in their attacks, seemingly with no regard for human life.
The RAF terrorists are Ernst Volker Staub and Daniela Klette, Burkhard Garweg.
The men drew their weapons, threatened a money career.
The fugitives spent decades living in hiding, with a corresponding need for money.
After each robbery, the terrorist trio would vanish from the face of the earth. The investigation is being conducted by the State Office of Criminal Investigation of Lower Saxony. Target investigators have been on the case since 2016, but no matter how hard they try, Klette, Staub, and Garweg cannot be caught.
You have to say that they were successful. You have to acknowledge that. Otherwise, we would have caught them sooner. It was always up and down. Time and again, we've received and checked promising leads, and in the course of these 9 years, we've always reached a point where sometimes we were even on the ground abroad with forces from the State Office of Criminal Investigation here in Lower Saxony, and conducted surveillance of properties there, even came across some people there, but each time we had to face the fact that we've been unable to catch the fugitives.
But Daniela Klette reveals herself online. She first posted on Facebook in 2011 as Claudia Ivone. She is now 53 years old. The RAF retiree, who for decades tried to leave no trace in the real world, now carelessly leaves them in the digital one.
It's still an open question for us as to why she was careless in that regard, as we would say today. I can't answer why that was the case. In any event, the fact is that the variety in her personal documents, in the way she went by different names, shows that she made a great effort to live a very secluded life without attracting attention.
Ivone, alias Klette, repeatedly posted photos on her page over the years. Her dance club also posted pictures of her gleefully celebrating along with the crowd at the Carnival of Cultures. The clues lead to the capital. All you have to do is find her. But Klette felt safe, not just in the anonymity of the big city, but apparently online as well.
People post, people publish, people are happy when they have lots of followers. I don't assume that Ms. Klette was looking for followers, but she still wanted to share her life and have a certain freedom too. In real life, she was probably more or less forced to hide. Then she probably used the freedom of the internet to express herself to the outside world.
Klette's urge to share ended in 2021. After that, she fell silent on Facebook. But the pictures remain. And the police aren't the only ones looking for the missing woman. Journalists from a podcast team are also hot on her heels.
In late 2023 and early 2024, of course, we were aware that there was a team of journalists who were also on the lookout and had the relevant findings. And we also knew about certain leads that pointed to Berlin, and we were already investigating those too.
The journalists fed the PimEyes software with the few existing photos of Klette. Taken decades before, the terrorist went underground. Then PimEyes launched the search. The software combs the web with the aid of neural networks and deep learning. As the journalists later point out, it took a total of around 30 minutes to find the woman the police had sought for more than 30 years. A colleague in Canada hit the jackpot and found Yvonne, alias Klette, on her Facebook profile and the page for her dance school.
Using millions of images, the software trains on the aspects that make up a person. The systems particularly rely on the region around the eyes. They're especially important. This was also discovered during the coronavirus pandemic. Users in masks were still able to unlock cell phones thanks to the distance between the eyes, the shape of the eyes, and the shape of the eyelids. All contain important information and also remain relatively stable over time.
Biometric identification systems now boast a hit rate of around 99%. Surgery on eyes, noses, and cheekbones could still outwit them. These systems also have difficulty distinguishing between identical twins. Wrinkles, weight, and facial expressions, on the other hand, are no problem.
I can use it to analyze lots of things, including emotions. Even if I have a similar picture, I can also recognize a person through the uniqueness of these landmarks because the facial shapes are different.
But this method is off limits to German investigators for reasons of data protection, for fear of surveillance of non-suspects and lack of privacy of citizens. For these investigators, internet searches are taboo.
If private individuals are allowed to use it, I think this enormous potential should also be available to law enforcement. Nowadays, it's not enough to just put up a poster in the bakery. Today, AI can also target these people with great precision. And we are interested in investigative leads. We want to develop clues. We don't automatically deploy our special units and break down doors when we see the first picture we have, and there's a high likelihood of evidence.
AI provides the podcasters with the clue that Klette could be in Berlin, but they don't find her at her dance club and don't follow up on the lead. But just a few weeks later, the police finally get their chance.
After more than 30 years on the run, Daniela Klette has now been apprehended in Berlin-Kreuzberg.
Klette is believed to have lived on the 5th floor of this building.
The public prosecutor's office and police in Lower Saxony were unrelenting and followed every lead.
They just rang the bell and then realized this is a direct hit.
The investigators find money, ammunition, a bazooka, and weapons in Klette's apartment. The decisive tip was received from the public, independently of the podcast journalists' research.
In this respect, it also has to be said that ultimately, the team of journalists did not track down Ms. Klette. They tracked down a contact. They managed to identify her using artificial intelligence and facial recognition software. But in the end, they were unable to find the address of the person they were looking for. And there were a few more pieces to the puzzle, which were then completed by the investigators from the State Office of Criminal Investigation in Lower Saxony.
The crime thriller is over. It shows how important both investigators' efforts as well as the aid of technical progress are, which criminals have long since discovered.
The world has changed, it has evolved. We are dealing with completely different offender structures and completely different phenomena. Offenders use the internet and digitalization for themselves and their own purposes, and the police urgently need tools to counter this.
Crimes planned and carried out in the digital world have devastating consequences in the analog world. In the EU alone, according to the European police authority Europol, millions of people fall victim to cybercrime every day. Phishing, scamming, ransomware. Cybercrime has many names. It's not just fraud and blackmail, but almost all variations of crime. He was a cybercriminal. Mike knows how easy it is to penetrate systems. He has a criminal record for 16 counts of computer sabotage and blackmailing companies.
At the time, I was attacking large corporations worldwide, DDoSing them. DDoS means sending masses of requests to the server, causing it to crash, and then you blackmail the company because you want to get a bit of money out of it.
Mike didn't make big money as a hacker, but he felt powerful, more powerful than law and order.
For me, it was a small trophy which I shared on Twitter right away at the time to get responses from users. Also, recognition. I just thought, I'm the big man here now. There's also an adrenaline rush, a kick you get when you realize you're attacking the servers, and at some point you find the vulnerabilities and these gaps in their systems.
At the time, Mike was operating through encrypted connections, tunneled several times in several countries.
And you really feel untouchable because as an IT specialist, you know what you have to do to disguise yourself. And from the dark forums you've been hanging around in and from other hackers' experiences, you also know exactly what the police are looking for and how they go about it.
A simple tool, a sloppily encrypted blackmail email, finally brings Mike down. That was in 2017. And since then, the tools of crime have become more sophisticated. The new superweapon? AI. In the hands of cybercriminals, it's a tool with terrifying potential.
We may not have reached the point where AI commits digital crimes completely autonomously. It's a tool that criminals use. Creativity is massively rewarded because any kind of new attack that people are not prepared for has a higher chance of success.
At the Fraunhofer Institute for Secure Information Technology, Martin Steinerbach deals with new types of digital attacks on a daily basis. His specialty? Deepfakes. Photos, videos, sound recordings manipulated to make them deceptively real with the aid of AI. Increasingly perfect. Also used by criminals. Manipulations that create entirely new dimensions of crime.
The Zelensky case was so important and dramatic because it was probably the first deepfake that could potentially have had a strong impact on a war. Because this speech by Zelensky, which was quite well publicized as a deepfake at the time, was a call to lay down one's arms.
Спочатку я вирішив повернути Донбас.
This also shows the drastic consequences successful deepfakes can have.
Real video and audio recordings serve as training material for neural networks. But deepfakes are not always perfect.
In this case, Zelensky's shoulder structure is simply not quite right. In other words, they took someone with a build similar to Zelensky's, but not the same, had him record the video, and then superimposed Zelensky's face.
A practiced eye can still unmask deepfakes. Soon, only AI itself will be able to detect AI-manipulated images. What was once unimaginable is now a reality. In Hong Kong, an employee was duped by a video conference full of AI clones.
A team, a complete management team from a company simulated by deepfakes. In other words, a real-time conversation with an employee conducted via video conference. A lot of people, a handful of employees in management positions. And together they persuaded the employee to transfer $24 million. The targeted employee said that he assumed that these were all real people, and they probably used facial reenactment or live deepfakes to take over the faces of the people, and most likely adapted their voices as well. I think that was the most brazen and successful deepfake attack, CEO fraud, ever committed.
When you can no longer trust your own eyes and ears, whom can you trust? When you no longer know whether your work colleagues are genuine, or the calls from your grandchild asking for money? Users themselves often post pictures and voices on social networks. Criminals use them. AI, their training camp. No one would know this better than former hacker Mike.
Nowadays, you can even ask the AI how to hack or falsify even better, and it simply collects further influences, let's say from huge databases, and learns them again and again from billions of entries. And whatever happens on the internet is also picked up by AI. So as a result, it naturally learns much faster than humans do now.
Mike has tried to find out what areas AI is penetrating in its insatiable search for information. He has used ChatGPT to create his own malicious AI assistant, which, unlike the official ChatGPT, faces no ethical or legal barriers that might stop it.
I played a role-playing game with my own AI. I pretended that there was a protagonist in a dark story, and the AI was supposed to pretend that it was talking about this protagonist, who then does what the master, in this case me, because I'm the boss, orders him to do in this dark world. And the AI knows no boundaries. It doesn't know how to say, no, I'm not allowed to do that, or anything along those lines, but rather, I must obey the master.
Even when the ex-hacker asks for instructions on how to build a bomb, the AI reliably delivers answers. Only late does it step on the brakes.
At the very end, after explaining how it works, it reminds me that it's illegal. It doesn't really ignore the ethics, but it still spits out how to do it via a back door. In the end, it always says that if you want to do it in real life, it's dangerous, but nobody who really wants to do it will care about that.
Mike left the hacker scene a long time ago. He no longer wants anything to do with the dark side of the net, but now he can and wants to show where the dangers lie.
I really see the greatest dangers in how unlimited this is. AI knows no limits, and certainly not an AI that's been developed to spit out whatever you want. Free of filters and ethics. You really are the only one that can hold it back. Ultimately, humans are responsible, but AI assists you. And it's almost like an accomplice that you can't hold accountable because it doesn't really exist.
AI as an accomplice. Will this unbounded intelligence become an all-purpose weapon for people whose criminal energy also knows no bounds? Martin Steinerbach is constantly working on counter-strategies. Software that can unmask fake faces and voices. But what about analog crimes, such as murder? Could smart cars or other AI-controlled technologies become a weapon?
If I program an AI such that it is rewarded for harming people, That's what the AI will do. After all, it has no morals in that sense. AI is a piece of software.
But humans are not helpless or at the mercy of this software. Human intelligence is still on par with artificial intelligence, and sometimes even superior to it. Nonetheless, law enforcement officers can no longer do without it. They need it as an ally to help solve crimes. AI versus AI.
The methods used to commit and combat attacks are often quite similar. For every type of AI attack, there are actually strategies for deploying AI to counter that attack.
Who uses new technologies first, and for what purpose? To commit crimes or to solve them? At the crime scene, when analyzing evidence, in the manhunt to catch criminals. The technological arms race between investigators and criminals has only just begun.